So I've been a product manager at Google for about 5 years, and I've spent that entire time working with the team that builds our API and service serving infrastructure. And someone asked me recently, is that a little boring? Are you ready to move on? At Google, people do tend to move around, work on different projects. Zach certainly can't stay on one. And I said, actually, it's kind of funny because in the 5 years I've been there, everything about it has changed. And not only has Google really started focusing externally and Google focusing on cloud, but all of the technology has changed entirely. So I've been doing this now for 5 years. I'm finally starting to understand it, even as the technology changes out from underneath. So I can answer, I'll hang out and can answer general questions about Istio at the end. And by the way, this team that is the API and service build infrastructure team at Google, they built all the stuff that serves all the APIs, all the internal services. It serves the Maps APIs, it serves all the cloud APIs, Drive, YouTube, Gmail, all those. They then about 2 or 3 years ago, we started focusing on external products. And the first open source project we did was gRPC. How many people know what gRPC is? How many people are using gRPC? It always surprises me. Yeah, it's great. We have a commercial product called Google Cloud Endpoints. We bought a little company called Apogee about 1.5 years ago. And then the latest, about 1 year ago, announced Istio. So I want to start with where we are with Istio. Any moment now, we're going to waft the smell of freshly compiled software is going to wash over us, and Istio 0.7 is going to be pushed. So we started working with IBM and Lyft a year ago December, and we announced last May Istio. We announced the project publicly. It was in GitHub the whole time. It was always started from line 0 in GitHub. And we announced in May, we announced version 0.1, and it took us about a quarter to get to 0.2. And I think after 0.3, we decided we should move to more frequent releases, so we could get functionality out faster, get people using it, and really get the project in better shape. So since 0.3, we've been doing releases every month. So we're up to 0.7. And about 4 weeks from now, we should see 0.8. We're going to call that a long-term support release, which means we will backport bug fixes, and we will do a 0.8, 0.1, 0.2, et cetera. We do have people using it in production. IBM, the weather company, which is, I think they announced some numbers. I think they're doing 400,000 requests a second. So it's serving some pretty serious volume. So that's where we are. Descartes Labs is in production, namely Matty Tables is from Namely, right? They went into production. We have another, not a customer again, but some people we know in San Francisco who are very, very close. So we have a few companies that are using it in production. The question that you asked was, is it production ready? We're not calling it 1.0 yet. And when we get to 1.0, we want some stability in the APIs, and that's very important. And we do want it to be certain features that we are, we're adopting the Kubernetes. There's alpha features, there's beta features, and there's stable features. So we want a set of core features stable. We want a set of test cases that we're running reproducibly, and we want to be able to tell you can expect to be able to handle, this many requests a second, and you can expect this much CPU consumption. And here's the things that we've tested. So we will declare it production ready at that point. However, it's certainly production ready for certain use cases right now, as evidenced by the people who are using it in production. And I think that's where I wanted to go with where we are right now. So, by the way, we're going to release 0.8. We also expect to get to 1.0 in the next 3 or 4 months. So not too many monthly releases after that before we think we're ready to get there. You're done breaking all the APIs, right? Yeah, we'll see. So what I wanted to talk to you is about 3 or 4 months ago, we went on the Istio World Tour. Louis Ryan, who is the technical lead at Google and one of the technical leads on the project, Varun, who was a product manager on Istio and has left to start some mysterious Istio-related startup. He and I, the two of us, went around to a bunch of cities around. We call it World Tour, although it was mostly confined to the United States and Northern Europe, as you can see. But we talked to lots and lots of customers. We talked at meetups. We went to the Kubernetes Production User Council in London. We went to small meetups and big meetups. We went and met panels of customers, panels of open source users, not Google customers, really tried to talk to lots and lots of potential users. This was after we had announced it. So, some people had played with it, some people were being introduced to it, but it was really a chance for us to go talk to people and figure out, what's resonating. It's kind of out there, people are starting to play with it. Do they like it? Do they need it? What do they need? What's wrong? What are we missing? And it was really a chance to learn about how people were thinking they were going to use this and how they were reacting to the feature set. And as a product manager, that's always great, because as a product manager, you want to figure out what people need. And I like to ship software. I like to ship software as soon as possible. And do we have any other product managers here? Good. As a product manager, the best way to ship faster is to what? What?
Not to do something.
Yeah, not to do something is to reduce scope, right? And that's exactly it. Find your minimal, define minimal as low as you can, and go for that. So whenever I talk about Istio, when I give kind of the intro talk to what is Istio, which I didn't do tonight because I figured you guys have all seen that before. I always talk about there's really three things, three main value propositions of Istio. One is observability, and this idea that we're gathering metrics and a standard set of metrics for all your services, that we're gathering logs, that we're gathering telemetry and tracing. Some people, that's one of the big things that it does. And the second thing is control, and that's control, the ability to route a request where it needs to go. Whether that's load balancing across a pod, whether it's load balancing to a different cluster, whether it's you're running a canary test right now, you want a certain header to go to test instances, that ability to control where a request goes is a really big deal, and some people really like that. And then the final one is security, just the ability to say, hey, we have MTLS, and we can put an authorization policy, so strong authentication and authorization. So one of the things we did on that world tour was kind of talk to people about this to try and suss out, like, do you need all these things? Is that what you need? Turns out, not everybody needs everything. And as a product manager, that's a great thing to learn, right? If there's something that people don't need, you can cut that and you say, you know what, we'll get to 1.0 faster. So that was good to know. The frustrating thing was that in our feature set, there was not a silver bullet. And even of those three, if you just break it down to just those three features, there wasn't one that everybody said, that's the one we need. If you have that, I'll start using it. What was interesting was that nearly every customer we talked to, potential customer, potential user, said, that's the one I want. And they had one that they wanted. And that was kind of a really frustrating thing to learn, was that for some people, observability was key, right? That's all they wanted. Give them that and they'll walk away, it's done, they've got it. For other people, it's the security. In finance, anybody here work in financial services? You're thinking about MTLS, right? And if you're not, you probably aren't. It's just the way it is. And for some people, it's the traffic control. So that was the big takeaway. When I came back from that, and it had been weeks of travel, and people said, so what did you learn on that trip? If I was going to give them 30 seconds, if I was going to give them 3 seconds, there's no silver bullet. And in fact, there's not just 3 features in Istio. There's a lot of features in Istio. I just stole this from someone else's deck. It's a partial list, but there's a lot of stuff that Istio does, right? There are a ton of things that it does. And in effect, you've got a menu of features in Istio, right? There's a lot of things that it offers. And maybe to some people, if you look at it, right, there's too many. Maybe this thing is kind of a Swiss Army knife, right? It's got the, you want to open a bottle, it's got the corkscrew. You want to open the other kind of bottle, it's got a bottle opener. You need to file your nails, it's got that, it's got blades, it's got scissors, and that's great. Sometimes it's great, but sometimes you can be thinking about a Swiss Army knife, and what you actually end up looking at is you see something like this. You think, what the hell? This thing is so complicated. Can it really? By the way, this is real. It's like 400 quid, and it's 2.5 inches deep. But that's the risk, right? Is that you think, oh, I don't need all of those things. I just don't need. I would never buy that because I don't need all of those things, right? And when we went to KubeCon or CubeCon, depending on who you ask, last year, there was already Istio had been around long enough to have pushback and to have people saying, I don't know why everyone's talking about service mesh. No one's even using it in production. I'm like, well, of course no one's using it in production. It's not ready for that yet, right? And then the other thing people were saying, well, it's too complicated. There's just too much, right? And so the question that we started asking ourselves is Istio table d'hôte? Side note, when you go to California, everybody can pronounce words in Spanish. We can say tortilla, and we can say, Sí, podemos decir tortilla. But ask us to say anything in French. Ask us to even approximate anything in French. We can't get close. But we all know what a table d'hôte menu is, right? It's where you walk in and the menu is fixed and you don't have options. It's a bunch of stuff and you're getting all those things, right? That's what table d'hôte is. And the question is Istio table d'hôte? And while you might not realize it, the answer is no. We've got a lot of components that can be used for a lot of different things. However, this is not a table d'hôte menu. Is that good? Why wouldn't you want to use it? It has all those features. I had that list that long. I could have made it that long. Why wouldn't you want to use all those features? Well, the biggest thing is you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, right? When you're taking on an implementation of a new project, it's a bad thing if you're going to do something that's going to add months to your implementation. No one wants that. I don't want that to happen to your project. I want it to be as simple as possible, and especially if you don't need MTLS, for example. I don't want you fighting with our CA, right? It just doesn't make any sense. It's really good when you're laying out a project to lay out good steps where you're making progress, even if they're baby steps, where you can show progress along the way of a project. So maybe you intend to eventually start using everything that Istio has to offer, but it's okay to start off with small and go step by step along the way. Because you can have victories and you can show progress and you can tell your boss, hey, that thing is working? We can do canary rollouts now. Hooray! Next quarter we're going to think about turning on MTLS. But you can show victories. And that's really, for those of you who work any place larger than, 10 or 15 people, it's kind of really important to be able to do. Say, hey, yeah, we did that project and we succeeded. And now we're going to go on to the next step. So what I'm here to talk to you about tonight is the fact that Istio is an a la carte menu. And we've got that list of features. You don't need to implement them all at the same time. You can turn it on for just the ones you need, and you can implement them over time. And so what I wanted to do, and I'm not going to talk for an hour either, Liam, is tell you about a few use cases. We're in this weird situation that we're an open source project, but some of the people who are in implementations are customers of ours. So I don't actually use names for most of these, other than when people have spoken publicly about what they're doing. But everything I'm going to tell you here is based on something that somebody is doing right now, after they looked at the feature set of Istio. So I wanted to talk to you about these different use cases and the different features. So I talked about those three main features, but there's a bunch of different components, right? We talk a lot about Envoy, Pilot, and Mixer, but we do have a certificate authority. We talked about the initializer earlier, because what do you do when it's down? And then, of course, we have the ingress functionality, ingress proxy. And these are actually modular, and you can actually choose which ones of them you will use. Now, I will argue that everyone has to use Pilot, and in fact, that's really the definition of if you're using Istio or not. If you're using Pilot, you're using Istio. But you can not use anything else you want to, which is kind of crazy. Lots of people don't think about it that way. So put the menu up on a chart, and you can see all the different pieces. In fact, there's more pieces than I even listed there, because Mixer has plugins, right? And we're shipping a bunch of plugins out of the box. We're shipping an authorization plugin, something to do quota, integration with our own, so a couple of integration with our own products that I don't know if they'll be in open source at some point. Obviously the Prometheus integration. What's that?
They are.
They are, great. Yeah, so he wrote Stackdriver, it's there. So, it's funny because there's like 40 engineers at Google working on Istio, or maybe 35, 40. It's a lot, but it seems like Zach wrote all of it.
That's definitely the impression I like to give.
Yeah, that's L5 vision right there. So this is a pretty component. I'm gonna show you. So this is what this diagram. Take a mental snapshot of this, everybody. You can use your phone to take a snapshot if you want to, because I'm going to refer back to this later in some different use cases. So the first one is actually the one we anticipated, which is not everyone's going to want or need MTLS. Why not? A couple of reasons. One is you do have to run a certificate authority. It's another thing to make sure it's running and to think about what happens if it's not up and stuff starts not working. Second, encrypting takes CPU cycles, and depending on your workload and depending on your wallet and depending on your sensitivity to latency, all of those things might say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to pay that cost. I don't want to pay for that CPU. I don't want to pay for those microseconds. And I don't want to pay for the hassle of running that surface. So this one we actually thought of. And those of you who have installed Istio from the site will know that we have basically 2 installation scripts that you can run. One installs auth and one does not. So if you don't install auth, it simplifies the picture a little bit, right? You're not installing that component at all. You lose all those nice little lock icons everywhere. But for a lot of people, everything here is behind it's on your Kubernetes clusters. It's behind a firewall. Nothing outside can reach it, and you don't need it, and that's okay. We will tell you at Google, our best practice that we talk about is always secure everything, right? We run a flat network internally. Every single call from every single service to another service is strongly authenticated and authorized, right? That's a best practice. You don't have to implement that. Most people don't implement that. You're not doing that on all of your other stuff that you're running right now. You don't need to start doing that just because of Istio. Over time, you might decide to do that. There's very compelling reasons to do that. But Istio doesn't have to be the event that makes you start doing it. So if it's easier, it's okay. You're still using Istio. Don't feel bad. It's all right. Another thing, Descartes Labs is the name I can say out loud. As I said, they were the first company to go into production, version 0.2. And that should tell you how desperate they were for, and I don't mean that like that wasn't a joke. Like really, that should tell you how desperate they were for observability. So they have pretty cool technology. They take satellite images, they run machine learning algorithms to draw really interesting conclusions like crop yields and stuff like that, and then they sell access to that data. They have some pretty high volume clients. Do I keep stepping on that? I'm sorry. So they had moved to Kubernetes, and they were really happy with the scalability. They were really happy with repeatable deployments, a lot of things they really liked. When their app ran slow, they didn't know why, and it was driving them crazy. And so for them to get a good dependency graph and to be able to understand how much traffic on a particular service was coming from another one of their services, that was super, super critical for them. Because then they could make sure they were scaling that one appropriately. And otherwise they didn't know how to, and sometimes they could tune how much one of them was calling. So for them, it was worth going 0.2, which I can tell you was not production ready for many use cases, but if you turned off everything and you only used the Mixer plugin that was doing observability, you could get your dependency graph and you could get those metrics in a Grafana dashboard. We sometimes use this quote. There's an actual quote from Tim Kelton. Everybody got fired up about Kubernetes and microservices, and then they were like, "Oh shit, what's going on?" And that's how they felt. So Istio let them find the trouble spots. So this is what they had to install. Now you'll notice they're still running Pilot. They're still running the Envoy proxy. They're just using standard Kubernetes ingress. And the only plugins that they need are Prometheus and Stackdriver. So their Mixer deployment is much simpler, and therefore it's taking less resource, et cetera. But they went to production on this last, I don't know what it was, like September or something. Perfectly valid. Ordered a la carte off the menu. Next one, we have another customer who's not a customer. This is not a customer, but another company who I hope they start talking publicly because I think it's cool when people do that. They just need ingress. They need better ingress control on their Kubernetes cluster. They have about 2,000 unique services running on their cluster. Now, they don't have service-to-service traffic, because in fact, it's multi-tenant, and they have every one of their customers has a service running, essentially. And so they're not so concerned about they don't have traffic between their microservices. Everything is from ingress to an individual service, but there are about 2,000 of them. All they wanted was the Istio ingress. I guess I should have had some lines here, because they are monitoring that, of course, and they're pushing the config through pilot. But they didn't go with sidecars. Now, over time, they probably will add sidecars. But as you can see, this significantly eases their adoption. Throwing a sidecar, if you've done it before, then you think it's just another thing to do, and it's fine. You're kind of used to the idea. If you haven't done it before, you can see that it's a scary step to take, especially if you're running 2,000 of those things, right? So the ability to say, you know what, we're not going to use the sidecar. Now, if you have service-to-service traffic, you're really missing out on the observability. You're going to want it. But if you don't, it's okay to do that. They're using ingress, and that's all. So again, perfectly valid. They ordered a la carte. They started now. As I said, they are going to go to sidecars. They want more of these features, but they decided to pick something small-ish, get to know the system, get used to running it in production, and that's what they did. We have another customer who is heavy. This is a customer, and I'm sure that they will let us talk publicly soon. They're heavy gRPC users. They've been developing in microservices for a long time. So they have about 100 gRPC services in their Kubernetes cluster, and they're all gRPC. There's a problem with gRPC and load balancing, which is most load balancers out there don't know what to do with gRPC. They're not very good at balancing what to them just looks like TCP traffic, right? And so this company has to stand up a L3, L4 load balancer in front of their service, because as their service scales, they need to just do plain old L3 load balancing, right? They're running 100 of these services, and they run a test and a prod and a staging, or maybe it's a dev and a staging and a prod of each of them. So they're running 300 load balancers. Now they're Google customers, so they're paying us for those 300 load balancers, but they're running 300 load balancers. It's like $60,000 a year or something that they're paying for load balancing. It's kind of a drop in the bucket in their bill, but they don't like spending that extra $60,000. If they could get the load balancing, the client-side load balancing of Envoy, they can turn those down. It's going to be like that. They install this open source project, and they're going to just turn all those off. So for them, they're using Mixer, but they're not using authentication. They're not authorization. They're not using quota. They're not using IAM. All they want really, they'll take the monitoring, of course, but all they wanted really is the client-side load balancing. So for them, they are going to use ingress, and they are going with the sidecars, but just the ingress and the sidecars. And then there's what we get in finance frequently, and that's, you know what, I have so many APM tools already, and I have engineered the crap out of every single binary that we have. I don't need any more monitoring. I don't understand what canary rollout means, so I don't know what you're talking about when you say that. We're deploying monoliths anyway. I don't understand that. But if I don't get authentication and authorization on every call soon, I'm gonna freak. Or actually, there's another really interesting case for this, which is, right now, most people use IP addresses for security. And when I say you use IP addresses for security, you use IP addresses within your network, with your corporate network. It's very common. You have it segmented and partitioned, right? And you can stay within this zone, you can call services, but you can't call out to this one, and in this zone they can call out. So we went to a bank that has more developers than we do. Yeah, think about that, right? Yeah, their IT budget is something like $12 billion a year, which is probably more than all of our IT budgets together, right? Their data centers are partitioned for security, but the problem is it's very difficult for them to change those partitions. And they have some partitions that are completely oversubscribed, that have more workloads running, and they can't run them all. And they have others that are running at 50% capacity. But they cannot take workloads from over here and run them in here because there's no network connectivity, right? They want to turn off internal partitioning. And in order to do that, they need something else to protect their services, because you don't want to do that and lose your security. You want to make sure only the right things can call each service. At Google, as I think I said this before, we run a flat network internally. We don't have any internal partitioning. It's much, much better. You don't have that problem of, you've got unused capacity over there, but you can't take care of it. So all they want is the control, is authorization and authentication. Now to do this, they are going to have to install all the components, but they can have a simplified mixer install. They don't need to have that Prometheus adapter in there. They don't need to have quota adapters in there. They don't need to send data to Stackdriver. All they're going to do is authorization checks. Maybe they'll use RIM. Maybe they'll use their own. But all they will do is authorization checks. Is a service, when a call comes in, when this thing goes to call this thing, first of all, it's MTLS, so we'll know definitively where that call is coming from. And it will check to say with the auth policy. It will say, now I know definitively who is making this call. And once you know that, you can make an informed decision. Do we allow this call through? As an aside, as I said at Google, we run a flat network. Any place on the network can call anywhere else on the network. But every single call is authorized. And services can only call services that they have been explicitly authorized to call. It vastly simplifies our network topology. It means we don't have to spend as much time and effort administering our network as you guys do, which is ironic since we have a much more secure network than probably anyone here. It's kind of crazy. But by ensuring that every single service on the network is secure, it means you don't have to use partitioning for security anymore. And it's really, really freeing. Now, I don't imagine that the people in this room are going to be able to go convince their network people, hey, great news, you don't have to do this anymore. But over time, that is going to happen. Over time, I really think that's going to start happening, and people won't do that anymore. But the banks are starting to do it now, so when they look at Istio a la carte, there's one thing they want, and it's authentication and authorization, which is two things. Let me sum up. Oh, I meant to put a big sigma on here. Do you mind if I finish my slides real quick? No, there is no time. Let me explain. It's not table d'hôte. And we want to do some things to make this easier. We'd love to, put this up on the website so people know it. It would be really good if we really get some time, and maybe some of our DevRel friends could help us with just some more install scripts. Say, if all you want is auth, here's the install script you want. If all you want is monitoring, here's the install script you want. We'll probably get there eventually, or maybe other people will. You guys, PR is welcome. But we want to make it easy through our documentation and through the scripts to make it clear you don't have to turn this on. It's not that daunting as a system. There's 7 running components, but to some people it's a big deal. And especially if you can, if you don't need a mixer, that's going to be a high volume service. So if you don't need a mixer, don't run a mixer. It'll make it easier. You turn it on later, right? But it'll make it so you can adopt easier, you can adopt faster, you can show that success. Show your boss, hey, this project is showing returns and making progress. It's a good deal. And tell people about this, please, right? Tell people, just remind them. You don't need all the components if you don't want them. Hey, thanks for listening. I think that's all I have to say. So I have a Twitter handle. I tweet there. It's not very good. There you go.